Who designed
This is going to be bad today.
Oh, like in the top there? Yeah. No, I thought you were talking about this. That makes sense. That makes sense. The top doesn't. The top doesn't.
All right, everybody, we're going to get started. Fill out the attendance link if you haven't done so yet. Okay, so our VApp tonight is defsec_MySQL. That would have gotten pushed out to you if you did the attendance link last week. If you didn't, pull it down from the catalog, power it on, so that you're ready to go when Mike starts presenting. There is an issue. Do you want to go over that when you?
Yep, I will.
Okay.
Don't power
it's
it on.
not. Yeah, don't power it on. It won't work. Mike will walk you through it. Okay, and then so before we move on, Jacob and Brian, we're going to talk a bit about red teaming for the mock. We're changing it up a little bit this time around, so hand it off to them.
Brian's wearing a red shirt, man.
Yeah. Let's use the red team. So I know I didn't get to talk about this on Wednesday during OffSec, so I'm going to talk about it to you guys tonight. As you guys have shown in the last mock, you guys are getting really, really good at CCDC. And we were very surprised about how well you guys did. So starting at the next mock, we're going to be formalizing the red team, which means being a little bit more selective and having not just warm bodies in the room, making sure everyone is on the same page, same game plan, and we all know what we're doing when. So right now we have a sign up red team on the link that Nick sent out. So it's more of a list right now, and we're still figuring out who's going to be red teaming for this next mock. But for future mocks, we do know that there's some requirements to be red teaming, and those requirements are you need to participate in the blue team at least once on one mock. You need to come observe and be mentored by some red teamers in the red team room for another mock, and then also pass a skill test that is yet to be made to prove that you have necessary skills for being on the red team. We're doing this to help you guys improve and be better. We want to be better as well, provide you a more realistic experience during these mocks, so that you're more prepared for the real CCDC and other type events. Anything to add?
Any questions?
How do you sign up to be mentored?
So in the same link that Nick sent out for the blue team or red team, that's what that sign up link essentially is going to be for.
Okay.
The red team portion of that.
Yeah.
Anyone who's on, anyone who got the email 2 days ago from Brian is fine.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, so Advanced Linux on Thursday at 6 p.m. in East Hall 001 in the basement here. We're going to go more in depth with MySQL, talk a little bit about our attempts at changing web application passwords using MySQL scripts, and some more just like general depth into MySQL that we're not going to cover today, I guess. Then for Mock 2, this is your last chance to sign up. We're going to close signups tonight at midnight. We're going to pick teams tomorrow morning. So this is your last chance if you want to be 100% certain that you're going to be on a team. Sign up right now. If you try to sign up like tomorrow or Thursday, you might not necessarily be able to get on a team. So make sure you do that.
So when is this competition?
Sunday, October 21st.
That is this Sunday.
This Sunday, yep.
Okay.
Everybody good with the link? Okay. So now Mike's going to start with MySQL.
John's phone's going off. So it's actually gonna. Oh, okay. Yay. Okay, so minor issue with the VM. Once you pull it down. So it was Cody, right? That one's creating, but I'll just show you on this one. So you guys pull down the vApps, or you already had them. Hopefully you haven't powered them on yet. Once you go into them, what you need to do is right-click on the MySQL. Thanks, MySQL. I really wanted you to pop up in my face like that. You're gonna click on this box.
Did you disconnect?
Oh, did I disconnect? Oh, serious. Ooh, that could be unfortunate. Did you guys see MySQL pop up, the VM pop up or not?
Yeah.
And then it just magically disconnected?
Yeah.
Interesting. Or is this Cody's fault?
Try replugging it.
I think this is Cody's fault. Okay. Oh, because I'm switching on my end. But it wasn't displaying.
Broke the projector?
I don't know. Okay, do I have output yet right now or not, Cody?
No.
Okay, I'm just going to cycle a couple times. Okay. And now yours went away.
Well, that's.
Yours just goes away every so often?
No, it's me clicking it out.
Here, I'm just going to reconnect. I can do it the fancy way, I suppose, if I need to. Why'd you have to break it? Mine actually claims it's mirroring. I'm going to blame this on you.
It could be. There we go.
There we go. Woo!
It didn't change anything.
I don't know. Oh, we're down again. Was that you again?
Maybe. Proceed.
Okay.
Carry on?
We good?
Maybe. We'll try it.
Okay. Back here again. Right-click on the MySQL VM. Go to Properties. Go to Hardware. Scroll down here to Nix. And you can't do it because mine's already powered on. But you're going to click this little button, and that's going to, a little tab's going to pop that says Reset. Click on Reset, then click OK. It's going to say busy for, a second or two, which it did anyway. I don't know why. And then you're going to right-click on it and then go to Power On. And it should power on successfully, and then power on your other VMs as well. At that point, you should just press this little button to start, and they should all power on. No problem. Everybody got that? Any questions on that topic of, fixing the VMs?
HTML5 interface.
What?
How do you do it with the HTML5 interface?
Cry?
You don't use the Flash.
Okay, so HTML5 is, bad, which is awful because it should be the better one, but it, for some reason, is lacking a lot of the functionality to, do basic stuff. So I would still suggest use the Flash interface, even though we got the brand new HTML5 interface, because, it works, and that's always good. Any other questions besides that one? Raise your hand if you're not here yet. Okay, I'm going to give him a minute. Nick, you want to, I don't know, browse?
Yeah, raise your hand if you need help.
Okay. Only 4-ish raise helps, but like 8, 10 brokens. Okay, I'm going to start presenting actually, but you guys get it figured out. We don't need those till a second anyway. Okay. MySQL. What's MySQL? MySQL is a relational database, which basically what that boils down to is we have tables that have rows and columns, and that's where we store our data. It's multi-threaded, which is always nice. It uses SQL, which is structured query language. That's kind of it's not really a programming language, but it's the language we use to communicate with the SQL database and to do stuff in general. And it's available over the network, which is why it's problematic. Any questions on those, 4 things? Okay, I'm going to probably wait half a second while they figure themselves out then.
Do we reset NIC 1?
NIC 2. The one connected to vCloud Internet, that's the one you want to reset.
Okay.
And just to explain what this whole entire issue is, there's two bubbles when you guys push a VApp out to the catalog. There is the make identical copy and the let people customize their settings. The let them customize their settings sometimes causes its own problems, so I decided it would be a good idea to click the make identical copy. And what that means is nothing got changed and everybody got pushed out VApps with exactly the same MAC addresses. Does anybody know why that would be problematic if we have a network with, you know, like 30 VMs and they all have exactly identical MAC addresses? Yeah, it's problematic. So because of that, vCloud will not let duplicate MAC addresses occur, which causes the problems that we can't start the VMs. So for future reference, if you're pushing out to the vCloud, click the other box that's not make identical. That causes issues with guest customization, completely unrelated issue, but sometimes. But I think most people are goodish now. Raise your hands if you're still broken. Significantly less. Okay, let's proceed. So 4 things: relational, multi-threaded, uses SQL, which is the language. That's why it's called MySQL. We also have MSSQL, which is the Windows version, and it's available over the network. Now we're going to jump right in, which is why I wanted to have everything going. So if you guys go over to the lab and then just open up the MySQL one. So MySQL VApp, this one right here, the one labeled MySQL. Not confusing at all, right? Okay. Log in with root. Password, as always, is going to be password one bang. Okay. Now we're here. For a lot of services, we tell you to make backups, and this is basically how we're going to do it. MySQL comes with a nice little utility called MySQL dump. This is basically the command. We use MySQL dump. We use the -u flag, which means user. We want to do it as the root user account. -p means we're going to enter the password at some point. That doesn't necessarily mean the next thing's a password. It just means we are going to enter a password. And -a means all. We're going to do this for all the databases. And then we just, normally this is going to output just a standard out, so we're going to redirect that to a file. So we're going to use MySQL dump, -u, do it as the root user account, -p for password, and then let's output it to, normally you're going to want to put it somewhere different, aka the root directory, which I'm actually already in. The password is also going to be password one bang, hopefully. Yeah, and it's going to cry about MySQL.event, and then it's going to output. So let's kind of look at what we're actually dealing with here. Yeah, we do not have Vi, we only have Vim. So this is what our backups look like. Something to note, and something we're going to kind of go over as we continue. The backup, so this is a backup. Normally you kind of assume the backup to be some arbitrary data file, or binary, or something you can't necessarily read. MySQL backups are literally just SQL commands. That's all it is. So when MySQL is recreating databases, it's basically just running all the necessary SQL commands that would actually take to recreate that entire database. So that's what we get here. So now we have a backup. That's nice. It's probably a good idea because I think people are going to break their stuff here in a little bit. Next command down, if you notice, we do -b and then the database name. That's basically the same command, except instead of exporting all the databases in our MySQL database, we're only exporting one. To basically restore from this backup, what we'd have to do is we're just going to run MySQL and then use -u, flag for user again, for root, make sure I type it right, and then -p to once again say we're going to use a password, and then just input it like this. You can press enter if you want to. It shouldn't hurt anything. Well, actually it might hurt things, so don't run it. But if you do run it, you can probably wipe your database quick here and restore from backup again. I actually don't know. I'm not going to try it because it might duplicate everything in the database. But that's normally the command of how you're actually going to restore from backups. Next step here, MySQL has another nice little utility that we can use. It's MySQL Secure Installation. It fixes a lot of the default problems. We're going to run through that here in a second. Normally, I'm going to suggest you glance at it before you run because there is some things in there which, depending on how they set it up during the competition, could cause problems. We're going to do secure. There we go. That's it. Okay, so basically it's kind of like an installer wizard. It's going to ask us a lot of questions. First thing, we got to punch in the password. So it's asking us what's the current root password. We got to use it so we can authenticate. Ask if we want to change the password. Of course, this is probably going to be a yes. Most of the times, although we're going to do no for the moment for reasons. But keep in mind, normally you're going to, of course, change the root password. Remove anonymous users. This one's always going to probably be yes. You don't want people to be able to authenticate to your database, or rather not authenticate and be able to access your database. Disallow root login remotely. Once again, something you're normally going to say yes to, we're just going to say no. And I'll explain all that in a reason. Remove test database, yes. Normally that's not going to be a big deal. And then, yeah, you're going to want to reload the privilege tables. So basically, we just went through the installer, but we didn't actually change anything. And the reason for that is, as I said, I'll show you guys in a second, but it boils down to we have all those insecurities in our database already. So let's go one more slide. Databases are kind of the highest level structure we have. So here, first of all, I guess we actually want to get into the MySQL client. So to interact with MySQL from the command line, we're going to use the MySQL command. Same flags as before. We're going to use the user root, -p for password, just like that. There's some other flags, which I'll go over here briefly. If we use -h, that represents the host. So for example, we wanted to connect to a remote MySQL server, and let's say 192.168.1.1. That's how we would do it. We use the -h flag, and we punch in the host. There's also port 1. Normally, that's not going to be an issue because when running MySQL, it's almost always going to be in port 3306. You have some other flags too, which feel free to look through the man pages on your own time. We're just going to continue. So MySQL -u root, -p for the password again. Depending on your installation, you might not actually have to use that flag. You can just type MySQL and it'll probably log you in directly. But for these purposes, we're just going to continue. So we can kind of start looking here on what the database actually contains. So show databases. That's the upper level command here. So that's going to show us a list of all the databases we have in MySQL. So we have information schema, we have a Magento database, we have MySQL, we have performance schema, and we have a WordPress. The two schema databases are something that MySQL just kind of keeps. Normally, you're not going to have to worry about them too much. We also have Magento, which, as a hint, means a Magento web application is using this. Same thing goes for WordPress. We have WordPress, and it's using this database. And then we have MySQL, which is kind of the core database. That's where all of our users are for MySQL. We also can create, drop, use databases. So, for example, we wanted to, we can create a database. Let's name him Dave. Why not? Oh, you know, actually, I should probably put that in there. Slides might be slightly incorrect then. So, I'm going to see here, we created the database named Dave. Delete it. Once again, don't see this is nice about SQL. Okay. Any idea why that one's not working, Nick, or just your guess?
If you drop tables.
It should be drop, shouldn't it?
Yeah, you put the.
Oh, my bad. That's wrong on the slides. No, it's not. Oh, yeah. Ironically, that's what I get for Googling things and not testing them. But yeah, that's correct. It's wrong. I'm going to be wrong on the slides for it is and it isn't. You can use delete, but not with that particular syntax. So it will be drop, name of the database, which was Dave. Drop database. It would, in that case, Dave. That's what it would have been. It should be drop. You can use delete, but the syntax is slightly different. For tables, I don't know if it'll matter. For databases, apparently it does. So continuing on. Oh, I want to explain what use does. Okay. So what use does is basically changes our current context. So for example, if we use MySQL, just like that, now we're basically in the MySQL database. Tables are kind of our next level down. We have our databases, and our databases are filled with tables. You can kind of think of these like any other table, like a table in Excel. They have rows and they have columns. The columns are what we kind of define what we want, and the rows is where we insert the data. Same kind of thing. This is why you have to use, because you have to select the database before a lot of these commands will work, because otherwise they don't know what they're referencing. So show tables, and we're going to get a giant list of tables. Time zone, this is the database for MySQL. So we have a user table, which is really what we care about for the most part. Same thing as before. I'm not going to go over, but we can create tables, we can drop tables, we can alter tables, which altering tables changes the columns. The only one we care about a ton is we can see columns. So if we do show columns from, and we type user, we're going to get a giant chart, which is actually so big it goes off. So each of these represents a column, basically a field where we can put data. And then we have a couple other things too. Before we get there, type pager and then less, just like that. What that does is lets us set our pager, set how standard out is displayed, and use the less command for that. So we're going to do that. Same command as before, show columns from user. And now it's actually in a way we can, actually read it and scroll down. So the fields, the types, which is in MySQL, we can kind of define the type of the table, like in any programming languages, we can define it as a char, or we can do some other things like enum and y means we basically only accept an n or a y for that category. There's just some other flags there for the most part. They don't matter what we're doing with, but feel free to look them up in your own time. SQL also in addition has kind of, the main commands. And this is where the meat of the content is, because this is how you really interact. A lot of other stuff is just for controlling whether tables and databases, but this is how we actually do stuff. So first one's going to be the select command. What this lets us do is basically select some fields from a table and display them. So in this case, we're going to select user and host from, and then we're going to do MySQL.user. You can use dot to represent a database and then a table. So in this case, I'm accessing the MySQL database and then the user table. In our current context, because we already did use MySQL, you can just do from user just like that, and that should work as well. And we're going to see two people right here. So currently in the MySQL database, we have two user accounts. We have root, and then we have Debian sysmaintainer. And there's two hosts there. We have what appears to be a %, and we have localhost. Localhost, what does that mean? Current system. That % is basically how MySQL represents wildcards. So that means from anywhere. So we basically have a user account that can only log in from the system we're currently on, which is fine. And then we have a user account that can log in from anywhere, remotely, wherever. That's where we have problems when trying to secure these systems, is when we have a lot of user accounts like that. There's really no reasons to have somebody like that once you're done securing it. You might have something like that to start because you have multiple web apps using it with different IP addresses, and that's simply the easiest way to punch that in. So you might get a lot of boxes with this, but ideally you want to replace host with a specific IP address of where that person can log in from, which we'll get to here. So we have those user accounts. Some other commands, we're just, we'll get to insert and delete as we progress, I think, down by the user. So let's continue forward. I'll go over these briefly. We have some other clauses we can use. So for example, if we were to do the same command, select user, host from user, we can also use the word where, and then we could do where host equals %. I don't know if this is going to require single quotes or not. There we go. So where's the equivalent to an if statement? We can limit our search queries, and we can really limit any other kind of queries. For example, if we want to only update user accounts with this particular name, that's where we use where. Order by allows us to, don't know if that's going to quite work. My syntax might be off there. Nah, it should be, I don't know if my syntax is going to be off or not. Yep, that's right. So order by basically lets us change how we search. For example, if we have a giant list of user accounts we want to see when they were created, that's when we use order by to change the ordering to like order by date. So now they're all sorted by date instead of sorted by, I don't know what MySQL does by default. Is it just the first column?
I think it's just the primary key.
Or the primary key of that table. Limit, kind of the same thing. So if we do this again, but we do a limit of 1, we're only going to get the first entry. All limit does restricts the number of entries we're going to deal with. Let's progress. Okay. this is where this is the main content right here to pay attention to. When we have user accounts, I'll do that one more time. You're normally probably going to get something like this. In this case, as we kind of already saw, we have two different web applications, and they both appear to be using the root account to authenticate to the server. Why is it bad to have multiple applications using one account to authenticate? Any ideas? I would like an answer in this one. Single user account for multiple applications. Why is that a bad idea? Yeah. If red team gets one, they get all. And in this case, with the way this is set up, because they're using the root account, they don't just get access to all the databases, they get access to everything in MySQL. So they get full permissions. That's why this is bad, as it's currently set up. It's because we're using root account, we're using it for applications, and that's really bad for us. So normally the way we kind of go about fixing this, for example, if you ran through the initial thing, there was an option there to disable root from connecting. But if we just disable this, if we disable root from being able to connect remotely, what that will cause is now none of our applications can access the database anymore, and now we're losing points. So when you're doing this, you probably want to do it in a systematic way. We want to create new user accounts, we want to give them the correct permissions, and then we want to adjust the web applications to use them correctly. So this is kind of the format here. To create a new user account, it's going to be create user, that as is, then the name of the username in single quotes, at the host in single quotes, identified by password. This is probably the cleanest way to do that. Here, let's do that quick. So create user. Some of you guys have probably noticed by now, SQL does not care about capitalization in I think all cases. I can't think of a case where it does care about caps. That's probably the only time this is ever going to happen in Linux ever. So savor it now. So if we want to create the user, let's call him WordPress. And for the moment, we don't really know where that host is coming from. So let's just make it wildcard, even though you don't really want to do that. Oh. And let's make his password super secure, of course. Make sure I didn't mistype that. Yeah, we're good. Okay. Nope, mistyped it. What did I do wrong? I actually don't know on that one. What did I do wrong, Nick? Of course you weren't paying attention, right? Oh, I misspelled identified. That's always nice, isn't it? So, I actually don't know if this is going to show us or not. If we do that again, now we have another user account. We have the WordPress user account. They can be accessed from anywhere. But something to note is they don't have any privileges right now. We'll get to doing that here in a second. If we have another user account, let's just make one more that we don't want to have. And this, I mean, it could be for any reasons. For example, you can even have multiple root users that can be accessed by different hosts. And we don't want them. We can delete them using just delete from MySQL user, and then that's where we use the where clause. I actually don't know. So if we want to delete that new user account we just made, you can also use this. For example, if you substitute host here, you can clear out of the ones with a wildcard host. It's just basically an if statement. But in this case, we're going to just clear out. Yeah. Didn't even show, but it's there. Yeah. Okay. So we didn't even see, but we just created a user account, Dave, and then we just deleted it. So it's not going to show up anyway. If we have existing user accounts, we want to change passwords, which is probably going to be one of your more frequent ways you're going to have to do this. So let's assume they didn't use one user account. They used multiple database accounts. They already had a WordPress account. And all we want to do is change the passwords because they're set to default credentials. That's where we get to use the next command, which is update MySQL.user. And that's how the update syntax works. We update, and we specify the table, which in this case is the user table in the MySQL database, and then we set the password. This is where it gets a little bit weird. We have to use essentially what's a plugin in MySQL to, instead of taking the password as plain text, we're actually hashing it, so that's where we have to use the password plugin. So let's change WordPress's password. Actually, Nick, do you know, that has to be all caps, doesn't it? Let's once again change it to a super secure password. And once again, that does not actually be caps. I actually don't know if that particular plugin or whatever. And my bad, I made a mistake here. If you notice, I was going to try updating the WordPress table. We want to do that instead. If I ever, like, you know, press enter and then everything goes away and you guys are behind, please tell me to, like, go back. So that should work, I think. Let's check here. Yep. Update MySQL.user, set password to whatever else, where the user equal WordPress. If we wanted to, we could also use this to roll out mass password changes. Normally, you're not going to want to do that because you want your passwords for each database to be different. But if for some reason you wanted to do that really fast, you could. Probably not the best idea, but it's an option.
Yeah, it's not case sensitive.
It's not case sensitive. Okay, there you go. That is not case sensitive. Something you should have to do after creating a new user account, which is odd because it didn't make me seem like I actually had to. If you type flush privileges, that's essentially doing a commit. You only need to do that when it's a delete, insert, or update, and that's only for the main MySQL tables. They use what's called grants. That's how they basically figure out permissions. Most of the commands in MySQL, when you're actually editing user accounts, notify the database, but the delete, insert, and update don't, because we're actually directly modifying the grant table, or in this case, the user table. So that's, if you use any of those three commands and you're modifying the MySQL.user table, you need to do flush privileges, otherwise it shouldn't take effect. If it does, I have no idea, but it shouldn't anyway. So we created a WordPress user account there. We're going to keep that. Let's progress. We have privileges. So actually, let me check here. I don't know if we did. Okay, so we did make, oh no, we already had a WordPress database. So we have the WordPress user, right guys? We made that a second ago with the create user account, but it doesn't have any privileges at all. So the way we give it privileges is we use the grant command, the second one right here, and we're going to give it grant all privileges on database name .star to username. So what that means is we're giving it permission on all the tables, and in this case, the WordPress database. So. Make sure I typed that right. Nope, see. Actually, I don't know if that has to be, it doesn't, no. Yeah, even I have trouble remembering. So we're granting to the WordPress user as well. And my bad, that does need to be. Okay. Okay, that's the command right there. So what that means is we're giving all privileges relating to that database. That doesn't mean even though it's all privileges, we're actually missing a couple of privileges that matter. For one, we're missing, it's essentially called the grant option privilege. What that allows us to do is grant other people access to that database. So WordPress is a user account that exists, but as far as I'm aware, it cannot create new user accounts, and it definitely cannot allow other user accounts to access that database. It's the only one besides root right now that can actually access the WordPress database. And that's quite important for some other reasons. Mainly that if you take a user account and you were to, let's say, don't type this, but let's say for some reason you want to use root and you just like that, we'd grant to a wildcard database for wildcard tables. The issue with that is it won't allow people to give access. So you can make a user account that can access everything, but it's not equivalent to root in this case because there's some extra grants that the all keyword, the all privileges keyword does not actually do. We're missing some grants in that case. So what I'm saying is basically don't delete the root account. You need that. Don't try to make another account that is like the root account because it's a different username. People won't try it right. Just keep the root account, change passwords on that. Don't revoke its privileges, please. Same way here. If you guys had pre-existing database accounts, what you want to do is you're going to want to revoke all the privileges. So revoke all privileges. And then this is the one I was talking about, the grant option. So that's equivalent to revoking all privileges, including the ability to allow other people to access this database from that username. And then you want to immediately grant them back. So that way we can basically clear out all the privileges that I might have to all the databases and just restrict it back down to that one database. Really the two situations you're going to have is one where you need to create new user accounts and one where you want to modify existing user accounts. Okay, we're actually reaching pretty close here to the end. Something else which I'm going to cover briefly, even though ideally this isn't your problem, you're probably going to have one person who gets to be the MySQL guy, and he gets to manage the database, and you're going to have somebody else who gets to manage with the web. You're going to have somebody else who gets to manage the web applications. But we are briefly, it's actually kind of funny. So go to www1. We're going to talk about how you would change it on the application side versus just the database side. So www1, login as root. It's password one bang. Just as a hint, it's always password one bang, in case you ever don't know what the password is. And then we're going to need to go to the HTML directory. Okay. This is WordPress. I'm going to give people a minute. In case that was too fast, cd to var www.html1 WordPress. So, this is something you guys are probably going to have to Google. If you don't know off the top of your head, there's different places where different applications will put where they connect to the database. This is where WordPress puts it is in wp-config.php. You're probably going to have to Google that. You might not necessarily know where it is in whatever particular application you get, but Google it, find it. It's, in this case, as said, this file. If we open it up, we get a lot of settings. In this case, we get what database, what the name of the database is trying to use, which is, it's WordPress, so it's trying to use WordPress. Very creative names. Trying to use the root user, which in this case, we want to change it to the WordPress user instead, because that's the new user account we just created. And then we want to change the password to the correct one. Normally, that host should probably be right, but that's definitely something good to check, because the people who are doing the web applications might not necessarily know what database they're even connected to if it's not specified in the scenario documentation. So this is basically the place you need to get to figure out, who's hosting my database? Which person do I have to talk to figure out how to get those passwords changed so they don't get broken on the database side. So, but that's all you have to do to modify it to use a different user account. It's pretty simple on the web side as long as you know where you're going. You shouldn't have to reset the service for database to take effect. That should be queried on every time. So we're going to go back to MySQL. Okay. Something that I do want to say, if for some reason Red Team manages to get in your box and change your root password so you guys can't even get into MySQL anymore, you do have some options. In this case, what we need to do is we need to kill the current MySQL server, and then we need to restart it with a specific option that is actually basically skipping the need to authenticate, which we can do if we have access and they have it, blown the whole box away, which actually with MySQL they probably can't, which I'll get to in here in just a second. So let's stop Apache. Not Apache, my bad. Thought I was in Web 1. Stop MySQL. Okay, so we stopped the service. Now, hopefully, if it actually stopped properly. Oh, my bad. Yep, so the option here is we're going to restart MySQL with -- skip grant tables. Just like that. Okay, now it's stolen our input. If you guys just do Control-Z. Oh, does MySQL not respect that? Okay, it does not respect that. Thanks, MySQL. I don't appreciate that. Oh, it doesn't. Wow, Nick. I'm very annoyed at MySQL. Okay. One moment here. Can I get hands raised? Who's using Linux?
You should be able to just do Alt F2, right?
What?
It only matters when you're on a GUI.
Control Alt F2?
Just Alt F2.
Okay, you think that'll actually work?
Yeah. You only need Control if you have a GUI.
Nope. That's my problem. Okay.
Or Alt F2.
As Nick said, basically, unbeknownst to me, MySQL D will actually eat all your input. For Windows people, that shouldn't be a problem. As Nick says, you should be able to do Alt F2. That is a minor problem for me. Let me fix that quick.
Alt F3 should work.
What do you think the chances are that Linux didn't bind something else? Okay, you're right.
Phone should work.
I'm never getting back though, right? That was probably F2, right? What that was.
No, it's probably F1.
It was F1? Okay, we'll find out. Actually, let's see if you're right quick. So,
Always do CHBT.
yeah, does that work with a non-GUI?
Yep.
Okay, that's what Alt F1 does. Thank you, Linux, for causing my own problems. Actually, that's why here. Let me just run that quick. Okay, that problem solved. Problem solved. Linux scripts, eh? Okay, so now we're back in a terminal. If we do MySQL again, it's going to connect us. Won't ask for a password. Won't try to do any sort of auth at all. We're back in. We have all the permissions in the world again, and because it's not checking our grants anymore. It's not looking at our user count and being like, do they have permission for that? No, we're skipping all of that. So this is good for going back in maintenance for if you forgot the password or if root deleted all your user accounts or something, you can go back in and fix stuff. There's obviously a problem here, and that's no user has to authenticate and no permissions are looked at anymore. So this means that if you have to do this for the moment while you're doing this, any red teamer can log in with any user account and be able to, nuke everything again and make everything worse. But we're kind of assuming they already got in and caused problems anyway. But that's how you do the skip grant table to get past that issue. Let's see, was there anything else I wanted to cover? Yeah, I was just going to talk about briefly the things you have to worry about with the MySQL system. The main one is going to be default passwords. So we're assuming this is accessible from the outside. So we need to make sure that our user accounts are actually locked down. Their passwords are changed, privileges are correct, which we can do by creating user accounts, fixing permissions. The second thing you're probably going to want to fix, it's not as big of a deal, but if Red Team wants to, let's see here. There's a MySQL history, which is saved in whichever directory you're using MySQL from. Which, if we look in here, has basically the list of everything we've done to the database. You do not want to have Red Team have that. This is the same problem that basically occurs when people ran the password change script without really realizing that it created a copy of all your passwords that we just kind of left there. In addition, this also has all of, if you can actually see there, 3 lines from the top, we actually have all of our passwords in here too, because this is where we set them. We set them in the MySQL command line. So that's problematic. Easy way, just echo garbage to that file. That will mean that you lose your, up arrow, you lost your history, but it's kind of worth it if Red Team can't just go in there and grab all of your passwords for everything. They can, if they already have access to the root account, they can, they can do stuff, but that's kind of the easiest way for them to do this. So at least have them take a little bit extra time before they can get access to that. So the main stuff is restricting down your hosts. You can change the hosts. We changed it to wildcard, but you guys can change that host and change it to an actual IP address. That's probably what you want to do. So ideally, each user account should have only the permissions it needs, a not default password, and then should only be allowing connections from whatever IP address. Any questions on that before I close out? Okay.
Do you want to run through that checklist quick?
Oh, yeah, we can do that right now. So in the drive, there is a MySQL checklist. Yay. I don't even know when we wrote this. We wrote it so long ago. As a reminder, we have tons of great docs in the training drive. May not be organized, but if you guys take a little bit of extra time to look through it, there's a lot of good stuff in there for most services you guys are going to encounter during competitions. Just to run through it quick. So first thing we do is we're going to do a quick select. We're going to look at all of our user accounts, see who's there. We're going to run MySQL secure installation. It says say yes to everything. Feel free to do that, but it may temporarily break your web applications. So if you say yes to everything, it will remove remote access from root accounts, which could, as said, break your web applications. So you can do that, but remember that it's probably going to bring your web apps down for a little bit. So keep that in mind that you are losing points while that's happening. So do it, but change it really fast once you guys do that. Same thing goes. Basically, if we don't have a web app user account, we're going to make a new one. If not, we're just going to change its passwords, change the password associated with that, and then fix privileges and a couple other things. That's basically what this is. We're changing the host from wildcard to whatever IP address. And then we're just also clearing out all the user accounts. Actually, that deletes. So what this statement does is delete from MySQL cable.user where user equals whatever and host does not equal that host. That will delete all users with that username that doesn't have that particular host. So what you do here is you basically punch in, let's say you have WordPress and there's actually like 4 rows that have the WordPress username and they all have different hosts. That's where you punch in the correct host, and they would wipe all the other ones out. And then there's flush privileges. Same thing goes. We want to revoke all the privileges, and then we have to want to re-grant them for all those user accounts we actually want to use the databases. Don't do that on the root user account. Bad things will happen. And then we have this number 6. Please ignore number 6 on this checklist. It will be a bad time. That's where we're going to go over in Advanced Linux. There is a way for you guys to change all of the passwords in your web applications at the same time. So that's basically the idea of, we have WordPress. WordPress has, let's say, 200 user accounts. If you guys change that through the GUI, how long is it going to take you to change 200 user accounts through the WordPress GUI? Any estimates? A really long time. 30 minutes, an hour, who knows how long. You can change it through the database, but let's just say web applications do hashing weird, and because of that, we have to take a lot of extra steps to make sure it's done correctly. So for now, ignore 0.6, don't worry about it. Same thing as before. The only difference here is we're doing a symbolic link. If you just want to clear the history, that does it once. What this does is it links it to dev null, which means that all your history is now being outputted to basically nothing. So it'll remain cleared. That's okay, do that. You will not be able to get history back. Same thing as before. In a lot of our checklists, we have the blackout period. That's basically everything above this has to happen really fast. Everything below, we can take an extra second. I don't really think that matter. I would actually back it up first, but I would back it up first, change everything, and then back it up again. But same thing here. We can back up the entire databases, and we can back up individual databases. And here's just a little script that'll back up all those individual databases a little bit faster. Because you might have, 4 or 5 or 12, and you might want to have to do it quickly. Okay. Any questions? Okay. I'm going to close out then. That was MySQL. We have the advanced session on Thursday, if you guys want to attend that. I think we now have Brian, who's still here. Okay.
So this is great. You guys have the red team. We're telling you guys how to defend your boxes.
He's lying.
Give me a minute while I figure out how to Mac.
They're the same thing, right?
Right.
So do you regret buying a Mac yet, Brian?
I regret nothing. Is that big enough? So bad. I think that's worse. That's fine. We'll deal with that later. Hey, it works. All right, so this is going to be a very quick overview on how to secure MSSQL. MSSQL is awful. Don't ever use it. Please, God, no. But if you do, like last year regionals, for real CCDC, they made us use MSSQL for literally everything, including WordPress. And it was awful. Thanks, Cody. So I'm going to go over just the basic stuff that I put together the night before when I found out we had to use MSSQL, and I'm the only one whoever touched MSSQL before. So first things first is the firewall. Use Windows Firewall, reset the firewall, and then disable all inbound rules because you don't need anything talking to you except for one thing, SQL connections into MSSQL. And that's over port 1433 TCP. So that's all you need open inbound is that one port. It's great. So after you've configured your firewall, you then change your passwords. So MSSQL has two different methods for authenticating users. You can use the first option here, local authentication with SQL Server, MSSQL Server. I don't even know what it's called. The administrator account is named SA. So that's the first password you should change, is the SA password. To do this, the most efficient way I found out was you open up a command prompt, type in SQL CMD, and then type that. Alter login SA with password equals new password. And you change the SA password. This is what Red Team will first try. They'll try and just brute force the SA password, the default password immediately, and log into your database. And then drop all your tables, because that's what we do. And then if you're super paranoid and you no longer need the SA user, and you've created your own administrative user, you can just disable the SA account as well. So the second part with MSSQL is it allows you to use the Windows authentication to connect to the database. So this includes local administrators on the local box as well as domain users who are also administrators. So to change all the local users' passwords in one command, you can run that PowerShell snippet that we came up with last year. This will change all local account user passwords and to whatever password you set. And now the Red Team can't log in using Windows authentication locally. And then tell whoever's managing the domain to make sure they change all the domain passwords. And then there's a couple other configuration options that are just good to do for the health of your SQL server. So the first thing is to make sure that SQL will only talk over port 1433. By default, it dynamically changes what port it uses, and that's not good for us because we want to block the ports it doesn't need. So you have to go into SQL Server config and all these different steps, which I graciously laid out for you guys here, and just enter 1433 in the TCP port section and blank out the TCP dynamic port option because we don't want that. Restart the SQL Server and you're good to go there. And then while you're also here, just go ahead and disable the SQL Server browser. That's just a method for other people to connect to your SQL Server anonymously. You don't want that. It's bad. And then the next thing is backup. I ripped this straight from MSDN because that's what I used. So I just followed this exact guide. And basically all you do is you right-click on each database you have. You go backup. You say where you want to back up and say go. It's really easy. And the GUI makes it really easy too. And I know I'm going over this really fast because I'm also going to demo a lot of this, hopefully. And this is what made SQL Server really, really bad initially, was they had a way for you to, when you authenticated, just to run any command you want on the system as an administrator. That's bad. So that's through the XP CMD Shell commandlet, which this here tells you how to disable. So it should be disabled by default in more recent versions of SQL Server. But in case it's not, you just have to go into SQL Server Management Studio and go to configuration options and make sure you disable all three of these properties. The big one is the XP CMD Shell enabled. Don't want that. And lastly here is just something good to have is login auditing. So you can see if the web applications that are communicating with your SQL Server, if they're not logging in successfully, if the checks aren't succeeding, then you can check to see if they're even logging into your server correctly, what data is being transferred and such. So, or you can see red team just brute forcing your passwords and laugh at them because we can't get in. So, yeah, that was my checklist. That's actually just all straight from the checklist I created last year for myself. Again, all it was firewall, passwords, and then disable a couple of configuration options. So there's not a whole lot to do with MSSQL to make it secure. People wrote books on how to secure MSSQL. So, yeah. Oh, come on. The IA lab failed me today. I couldn't actually get a VM with SQL Server up and running for you guys. I have one locally here. I just don't have the GUI yet. Okay, well, I can show you a couple other things while we don't have that. For the SQL, to change the SA password, is SQL CMD. And then I will directly reference my own PowerPoint. What? Probably. That worked. Okay. There you go. So you just changed the password of the SA account, and that's pretty fast to do. So hopefully you do that before Red Team actually gets in. So now that's changed. I'm going to go out over here. We can also configure the firewall. And this is a base install, so I'm just going to go to the inbound rules. Disable everything. New rule. Port. What was that port? 1433, allow, everywhere. All right, now that's allowed inbound. And if we come in here, this is the SQL Server Configuration Manager. Where is it? Oh. So under SQL Server Network Configuration, protocols for MSSQL Server, TCP/IP, IP addresses. That's not too bad. TC port 1433, and dynamic is blank. So just make sure all of them are set like that, and you're good to go there. Yes. And if I had the GUI, I would show you logging in and changing everyone else's passwords, but I don't. This won't run.
reset.
Okay. So if you do actually ever have to use MSSQL, which I hope you don't, on the left hand, there's a panel when you first open it up. On the left hand side, it shows the users. You just right click each user and say reset password. You change the password. It's that easy. And then there's also groups that you can make sure they're a part of, but just make sure everyone's not an administrator. But that's all I have. It's not much, but yeah. And I'll be posting these slides to Slack as well as uploading them to the Google Drive. So, any questions? Okay.
That's all we have this week. See you guys next time.